One of the very difficult things in corporate venturing is connecting with the mothership company, right? How does that work within Maersk Growth? Do you need a sponsor to do your investments on the CVC side?
Yeah, actually, it's really the million-dollar question, to be honest. And we work very closely with our internal colleagues, actually to a much greater extent than we used to before. So part of the strategic shift and direction for us was we were moved to these really stick with the strategy department, which have enabled us to both get closer to the opportunities and business needs of Maersk and the industry as a whole, but also being able to also help shape that innovation agenda, right? And then I think you speak about business sponsorship. I think we now actually have a team which is purely focused on engaging with our internal colleagues. So the way we split ourselves is that we have on the one side a team focusing that is really external facing, and the other being purely internal ambassadors. Yep, you might recall this as part of our previous portfolio management team, but now that's their sole role. And essentially, a key reason for us and for our existence is to bring external innovation solutions from startups to our internal colleagues and organization.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with ACE Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast, also to some known as the EU CVC podcast, because this is the series where we're focusing 100% on CVCs, trying to connect them into, of course, the European venture ecosystem, the pure VCs, but also to the larger landscape of corporates. So this is a bit with a different angle than the other episodes. And to help me do that, I have my good friend Jeppe. Jeppe, would you introduce yourself, talk a bit about this series, and introduce Ida?
For sure. I've been in the VC CVC space for quite some time now, 10 years as a VC operator and 5 years as an investment partner. And I am a former colleague of Ida's. So setting the stage for Ida. Ida has a long experience from Maersk and supply chain and has turned into this role now at Maersk Growth. We're here to talk a lot about what they do within Maersk Growth and understand how they operate their corporate venturing entity. But I'll give it over to you, Ida, to do a proper and right introduction of who you are.
Thank you so much, both Andreas and Jeppe. Pleasure to be here. And I think you captured it quite well, though. Currently, I work as the Venture Investments and Partnership Director at Maersk Growth. Been working with Maersk for around 13 years. In quite a wide variety of roles: commercial, business development, supply chain management in Southeast Asia, as you mentioned, and also some strategic transformation projects. And then around 3 years ago, coming back from my second maternity leave, I started looking for ways in which I could have greater impact, really, and ended up seeking out the opportunity to join the venture arm of the company, Maersk Growth. Initially here, I was really focusing in on portfolio management and bringing to life strategic partnerships with either the companies we were looking to invest in or the ones that we had already invested in. So that was the perfect segue from the corporate life to CVC because it could really challenge me to really understand what does it take to marry the world of startups and the corporates. Within the Maersk CVC arm now, I'm currently leading a team of a very talented group of people that are responsible for sourcing companies and solutions both for the equity investment side and also for strategic partnerships. And our key ambition is, of course, really to digitize and decarbonize supply chains.
For everybody listening in, can I get you to kind of, describe the broader picture? What areas of corporate venturing do you do? at Maersk Growth, but also, right, there's 100,000 employees within Maersk. You are one of them yourself. How do you leverage your own background in the work that you do? So maybe first, the broader picture, and then how does your background tie into what you do at Maersk Growth?
We really see ourselves as a global partner for external innovation. So in order to really drive forward Maersk's innovation agenda, we operate with two key levers of venture clienting. So on the one hand, through a corporate venture capital unit and doing equity investments focusing in on climate tech. And on the other hand, through corporate, so venture clienting and strategic partnerships with promising startups within supply chain tech more broadly. We're now on our third fund, which really invests exclusively in supply climate tech, as I mentioned, having made investments in areas such as green fuels, energy efficiency, battery technology, carbon capture technologies. And we really try to invest in early stage startups that can help fuel innovation that can enable us, not only Maersk, but also the industry to reach our net zero targets. We typically go in with a ticket size around or up to $5 million as a specialist co-investor. And if we look at the investment stage, we mainly invest in Series A, Series B. Currently, we hold a quite strong portfolio of more than 40 companies, hold supply chain tech companies such as LoadSmart, Dextory, Offload, Pactum, and we have climate tech companies such as Captura, Altruist, and Prometheus. Even though you can say focusing on supply chain tech and climate tech, as you also can see, it's within quite different areas of the business. And I think that is key to what you actually asked about. So how can you leverage the experience that you build up over years working for a corporate? You really have to bring in the expertise and domain knowledge from a lot of different business entities and colleagues. So for us, it's been really key to both work very closely with the VC community, but also with our internal colleagues. And I think, it's very clear that we are a strategic investor. So through our investments, we aim to gain, of course, insights, but also leverage emerging technologies. And from an investment perspective, we, of course, also want to encourage further investments from the financial community. So making catalytic investments.
So one of the very difficult things in corporate venturing is connecting with the mothership company, right? So a lot of time, it's a culture thing, and it's the tie into your colleagues. How does that work within Maersk Growth? Do you need a sponsor to do your investments on the CVC side?
Yeah, actually, it's really the million-dollar question, to be honest. And we work very closely with our internal colleagues, actually to a much greater extent than we used to before. So part of the strategic shift and direction for us was we were moved to really stick with the strategy department, which have enabled us to both get closer to the opportunities and business needs of Maersk and the industry as a whole, but also being able to also help shape that innovation agenda, right? And then I think you speak about business sponsorship. I think we now actually have a team which is purely focused on engaging with our internal colleagues. So the way we split ourselves is that we have on the one side a team focusing that is really external facing, and the other being purely internal ambassadors. Yep, you might recall this as part of our previous portfolio management team, but now that's their sole role. And essentially a key reason for us and for our existence is to bring external innovation solutions from startups to our internal colleagues and organizations.
That's where you want to get as a startup, that's where you want to get the most out of your corporate investor, right? And I think all the startups they're looking for, ideally they want a commercial deal, but what they do get from the CVC investor is, how do you actually build and run a bigger company, right? And that is where I see the stronghold of being a corporate. Could you share a little bit about, what value creation you do today within Maersk towards your portfolio companies?
I think every CVC will tell you that they bring additional value beyond the capital that they bring. However, I really truly believe that as a global logistics player, we do have something quite unique to bring them. It ranges from quite diligent and continued support provided by us as a team, but also our wider organization, post investments and partnerships, providing that ability to really test and validate solutions with industry experts, with, again, deep domain knowledge from everything ranging from energy transition, actually execution, to fleet management technology, to warehouse robotics and automation, right? Like if you have a successful proof of concepts and pilot running, we oftentimes see that the startups that we do work with benefit from that industry verification and stamp of approval, really. And of course, every founder would like to see their solutions having been tested and validated in real life operations, in real life assets, right?
There's two sides of the equation, right? So now we just spoke about, how does, your team, assist on the startup side. But one of the most important thing to make, a corporate venture entity survive, right? And remember, the average lifetime of a CVC is 3.7 years, and you're way past that one. But that is the connection into the mothership, and a little bit of a hint from me to you, right? What I got to learn in my last period at Maersk Growth was strategic insight. So if you share a little bit about what you do there to anchor the corporate venturing entity within Maersk into the mothership.
You're absolutely right. And I think it is, as I also shared before, a key reason for why we really exist. So we focus a lot of our attention on, of course, we want to inspire and provoke our colleagues, but also continuously challenging internal thinking. We are, as I also shared, quite business-led in the sense that we work actively with internal teams to understand what are the, biggest challenges, biggest impact areas where we can really help make a difference. But once sort of that is understood, we really want to also play an active role in bringing in both the full market map, but also, what are new innovative emerging solutions, new production pathways, new ways of really doing business to the teams. So we do that through a couple of different means. We do strategic insights reports. We do also have a newsletter, which is also shared externally. And then, of course, have demo sessions with the different teams, and also work with them as they, of course, define their strategic roadmaps as well.
And maybe a little bit more flavor from inside the mothership, right? So how do you extract knowledge from core Maersk and take that to the front of where you want to invest?
We do that in a few different ways. So essentially, it's not only about bringing insights to the startups that we work with, but actually also to some of the VC partners and other investors that we actually now actively collaborate with. We do see a lot of companies bringing solutions to us, and in order to really test and validate whether this is something that is a real business problem, we're able to then, of course, bring that to the relevant teams. Say, for example, if we focus in on energy transition, which is a space we are very active in, we have a strong team here, which all they do is really understanding how can we really decarbonize shipping and our global supply chains, really trying to understand how can this actually be implemented? How can this actually come to fruition? What does it take? What's the timelines? And how does that compare to other solutions in the market? So I think that is a key thing we focus on as well. Being able to sort of help validate and stress test both the validity, but also the execution of it, really.
Ida, most of your energy is used on the climate tech sector, also assisting Maersk, all the way to the 2040 goals, right? Can you share a little bit about your investment strategy? What is exciting for you at the moment? What startups would you want to see?
With most of our investments to date, and the first two funds actually focusing in on supply chain technology, there was a strategic decision that was made to really focus our future equity investments towards areas where we believe the most funding was both lacking and needed. So this led us to exclusively cover decarbonization, to really uncover different pathways toward net zero supply chains. And I think we have a pivotal role to play here, given the both vast amount of new promising solutions that are really emerging, and also the speed at which things are developing. I think, technologies and solutions which we just a few years ago deemed unviable are now beginning to really surface as something that can really help drive impact in the short to medium term as well. If you look at the different opportunity areas, it really is very broad. Well, as many of you might know us for our large vessels, when we talk about reaching the net zero emissions by 2040, that commitment actually goes beyond reducing direct emissions from our ocean fleet, but covering all modes of transportation and products that we offer to our customers. So we've made investments in the assets for transportation and storage themselves. So from a company side, investing in green methanol vessels, electric trucks, low emission warehouses, and then more on the lower scale end, actually looking into technologies that can help improve efficiency and the lifetime of those assets and the way that we actually operate them. And the alternative fuel space is, of course, somewhere where we're and alternative fuels and energy sources to really power shipping and supply chain. That's also where we've actually made quite a few investments now. Both represent massive challenges, but also great investment opportunities for all of us.
Obviously, climate tech and impact has taken a hit with the latest developments in the US. Literally to the point where there are some, the potential skeptics that were there before are definitely, emboldened now to say that there's definitely parts of the climate space that is going to have a harder time. Like looking at the points that you have here, assets for transportation and storage themselves, green methanol vessels, electric trucks, low emission warehouses. I can see clearly with low emission warehouses and electric trucks, there's pure efficiency gains because the technology is just better there. So you're using less energy and so on. But green methanol vessels, alternative fuels, and energy sources to power your supply chain, I imagine those could be quite driven by metrics around achieving net zero and so on and so forth, which means it's actually not as much about cost cutting or efficiency creations, but it's about achieving a set goal by the government and the corporate and the society. How are you thinking about this? What are the discussions you're having internally and so on?
We definitely don't see this as a battle that we would like to take alone. I think everybody really has to come together in order to achieve what we are setting ourselves up for. And this, goes across the large corporates to the startups to, as you also say, governments and regulations that needs to be in place as well. I think in order for customers to really, there's a lot of customers who say they do want to choose the greener, more sustainable ways of transporting and shipping their goods, but actually when they are faced with that $1 million question around what to really go for, it comes down to, can it actually be delivered at cost parity? And so for us, a key focus area is also, as I also said, focusing in on exploring different production pathways, different fuels, different technologies that can really enable us to come to cost parity, to also make it a attractive choice for the customers that also wants to do business with us as well. It's no question that we're looking into a somewhat more challenging environment. But I think for that very reason, investments in this space is even more needed now than ever, I think.
I'm super curious, Ida, because so one thing with your investments and the established portfolio and so on, every VC that we have listening in will also, be in that state of flux and figuring things out. Like we have so many VCs that we've spoken to on the podcast about how climate change is so on and so forth. And in the end, when they talk about it in respect to their Series A or seed startups, they're actually trying to figure out what's going on inside the likes of Maersk, because whether their technology will be adopted, it depends on, to a large part, how you view the coming years and whether it's important or not to actually transition. Can you share a bit like the discussions, the views that you're hearing expressed? Or even if you're not yet at a conclusion, which would make a ton of sense, right? Because we can't unravel 20 years of work on the because we have a 4-year interim pause potentially with an administration that doesn't care as much. But that said, I would say I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in the industry. Definitely, I hear a very, like almost a sigh of relief with the outlook not to have to measure every little thing. So they do want impact, they do want to contribute to a more sustainable planet and so on. But they also feel like we have probably gone overboard when it comes to making sure that we measure every little thing.
Personally, I think it's difficult to really improve something without actually having the data and measurements to actually verify and validate whether we are actually moving in the right direction. But of course, we see that it is going to be different from the growth journey that you're on in terms of companies. If you look at a large, well-established corporation versus a startup, as an example, but then again, you actually do see that a lot of the younger companies actually are very much impact-driven and are actually very good at measuring it, even though they might not be under the same rules and regulations that a larger corporate might just be. Then maybe going into your initial question around whether the jury is out on one specific technology or solution, I think since Maersk launched our energy transition strategy in 2018, we have continuously explored very diverse green energy options for our assets. And I think in order to deliver on our decarbonization targets and for the industry to really drive this very much needed change, we do need to continue to explore all possibilities. So we really do actually make an active point of saying that we are actually technology and fuel agnostic. We don't want to rule anything out. Of course, there's others that are looking more promising as of now. And that is something that we, of course, look at when we make short-term investment decisions. But I think we would do ourselves a disfavor if we were to discount the large opportunities and technologies that might just have a large role to play come a few years.
So we have the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, Larry Fink and BlackRock that have all walked back or started movements to walk back some of the ESG initiatives that have been made and requirements that have been made. Do you see that coming to the logistics side of the world as well? That the regulations will be loosened and the expectations, and thus also your strive toward 2040 net zero or whatever is the goal?
What I would say is that this is a global challenge. And if you see different, whether it be companies or regions or countries pulling back, of course, that will have an impact on whether you can actually achieve what you need to be going. But I think within Europe, I think the foundation and the sentiment is still very strong. And I think that will also help others to really see that it can be feasible, it can be doable. And then actually taking a step back, say, okay, this is the holistic global challenge, really trying to solve it area by area and create smaller wins that in the grand scheme of things will actually make a big, huge impact and difference.
Yeah, and it's also, it is an impact either, right? Because the shipping industry is so huge, right? And a good proportion of the emissions out there, right? But one of the key drivers, as far as I remember, right, is also when you go into the emission discussion and what Maersk can contribute with, right? And also looking in the, from the startup perspective, if they want to do it different, right? It's not, it's not trivial to implement new sources of, fuel to the ships, right?
No.
And because where I'm guiding you, right, is more, it takes quite some years to build a ship, right?
It does. Yeah. That is why also I think it's important to have this short, medium, and long-term perspective on things, because essentially we're sitting here with a vast amount of assets that and transportation modes that all need to actually be decarbonized. And like you said, first of all, it takes a long time to build. Like a large shipping vessel is normally have a lifespan of around 30 years plus. And so whatever you choose to go for in terms of technical descriptions and technology and fuel solutions will, of course, have a big impact for many years to come. Of course, there is a retrofit solutions and things like that we can also look into. But you're very right in your statement around it's not a very easy thing to do, and something that we, of course, also continue to look into as and when we make our investments, what will actually be feasible and viable to get onto existing assets and vessels.
A lot of people is talking about the electrification of the world. Will we see an electrical ship out there?
Good question. I think, again, something that we need to continue to keep our eyes out on. I think it's really exciting what is happening within the battery technology space. We are also seeing, again, different pathways, different solutions. And what we knew a few years ago, I would say, is definitely, reality is very different today than what it was just a few years ago. But I guess right now we're looking to cruise ships where shorter distance travel, where it has been proven viable. So it's something that we can continue to look at.
No, I've seen all kind of interesting cases, right? When I was the lobby employee of Maersk, right? Even sales on container ships, right? And kites and so forth, right? There's been many initiatives to try to, lower emissions, right? So I think it's super interesting to see what will happen in that space, right? So that whole side of things, the maritime part, is that part of the climate tech investments you would do within Maersk Growth?
Absolutely. So whilst, of course, we look to decarbonize all of our logistics and our full supply chain, where we have most actively invested in today, it has really been on the maritime shipping side, because that is where we, as a company, have the greatest emissions still to reduce today. So that is a key priority for us and will continue to be a key priority for us. We have made some really interesting investments to date. We have done green fuel investments. We've done biofuel investments, so drop-in fuels for our existing vessels, such as Kvasir and Metoro. Also looking into fuel cells, so reducing the fuel actually required. So we can actually not only use greener fuels, but also less of it. And then, of course, looking into new innovative solutions, such as different carbon capture technologies as well. Made a very interesting few investments in that space as well.
Ida, one of the big discussion themes within climate tech is folk investments, first of a kind, hardware, deep tech related investments. There is, in the VC community, right, there's a little bit of a, they're hesitant to do those kind of investments. How do you view that? Is that something that you do and have done?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting debate. And I think last September, I was lucky to partake in the New York Climate Week, and it was a huge topic there as well. And I think a better question, I think it was Department of Energy that kept on sharing this, that you should not only look at the first of a kind investments required, but the next 10th of a kind. So actually bringing together investment consortiums that could actually not only prove it out, but actually have a grand plan to to scale this for the next 5 to 10 additional plants that will also going to be needed. So I think that was actually quite a good way of looking at it, and something that we also very much keep in mind when we look at our investments. And yeah, to answer your question, that would be something that we would be actively looking for as well.
Yeah, I think it's true what you say, right? There's supply chain around these areas also, right? So fueling a ship in Denmark and setting sail for Australia with no fuel in the other end, right? That doesn't really work. So fully embrace that part of it. But Ida, when you kind of if we drill deeper into Folk, right? And we did a panel this week at Go West in Gothenburg, right? And I think when you look at offtake agreements, letter of intent, is that something that your portfolio companies and also the ones you meet within corporate clienting, is that something that you do at Maersk?
Most of the time, when we do our due diligence, both for investments and our partnerships, we always really spend time with the startups to understand what are they actually looking for in terms of support, and why are they keen to work with the Maersk specifically. Very often it's due to the growth and development opportunities that we as a strategic investor and partner could actually bring. But of course, it's also very often to understand whether we could become a future customer further down the line. And there's, of course, a pathway to that as well. Again, we are investing and partnering with oftentimes quite early stage companies where production haven't even started or revenue haven't even begun, but then sitting down with them to understand and also help guide them to what are demand needs at what point in time, and working with them towards a plan of if we were to become a future off-taker of them, what would that actually take? And yes, we have signed a few letter of intents and off-take agreements, especially if you look at the green fuel space. So actively working with our energy transition colleagues and procurement department on that.
Yeah, and just making sure that I also get a full grab on what you said when Andreas posed the question before and you answer, right? There are no green premiums to gain today in the shipping and logistics world. Is that correct?
We were optimistic initially. I think one of the things we have learned through customer engagement and continuously trying to also provide greener alternatives to the transportation services that we are offering today. It's not as great as we maybe expected it to be, but there is definitely customers that are very much open and willing to go for those more sustainable routes and products as well. But yeah, maybe not as grand as we first were hoping for.
I'd love to ask you, because we, and I'm shifting completely the topic here. We created EUVC and now EUCVC with the explicit focus to bring together the community more. And for that reason, I think just to make sure everyone understands the difference between CVC or corporate venture and then corporate venturing, could both you, Ida, and Jeppe kind of give a good explanation of that and how a VC would then engage with you on the one side and the other side, so to say?
Very happy to elaborate a bit on venture client or strategic partnerships, as we also sometimes call it. So venture clienting is our most recent lever and offering. And this is really non-equity collaborations with startups through POCs or proof of concepts and pilots to really test and validate innovations from the startup ecosystem. It's really about bringing readily available solutions to our operations more quickly. So if you take that into a Maersk context, for us, it's about accelerating transformation and looking to close innovation and capability gaps that we know we have here and now. The way that we work with it in comparison to sort of our equity investments, of course, we look for strategic partnerships and collaboration efforts, both for our portfolio companies, but also for other startups now. So an added lever, I could say, that we have, or an added benefit that we have been able to gain from doing venture climbing is that it now allows us to work with a broader spectrum of startups across all different growth stages, and also very importantly on challenges that require solutions here and now. So we're working with companies that actually have a proven product ready to scale with us, and ideally globally, right? And Jeppe, I'm sure you have a lot of additional points to add as well.
Yeah, I do, but it's something that I learned from you and your team, right? So let me put a little bit more on it, Sophie. So when I speak about corporate venturing, I speak about corporate's innovation path. And for me, depending on what sector you move within, it starts all the way from R&D. You might, if you are heavy on R&D in the sector you might even also have an R&D lab where you try things out, right? Then what comes a little for the corporate clienting part that Ida so nicely addressed was, accelerators, right? How do you gain a lot of understanding, and how do you tie understanding from startups and tie that into corporate culture? You can do that through a lot of roundtable discussion at events and so forth, right? And then you have the incubators of the world coming in, right? And there are specialists that do that. Then you have the corporate clienting that Ida just described. And then we have the direct investments that are, corporate venture capital as purely described. And then the last flavor that some big corporates, they decide to start with also to penetrate the ecosystem is to do fund of fund investments. So for me, the right strategy within a corporate looking at innovation and doing corporate venturing is to say, okay, what are all these elements? And where do we want to, you need to understand them all. And then where do you then start, right? I know for a fact that Maersk has been through it all, has tried it all, has succeeded in all of them, but have now a clear focus on what they want to spend their time on, right? And that is such an excellent place to be.
The VCs that are listening in, when they think about you, obviously as a CVC, you're then a potential co-investor. And I'd love to hear a bit about how the role you like to take there. You described in the beginning you're doing a co-invest strategy on that front. So maybe talk a bit about that. And then on the corporate venturing side, how much do you, with that arm, so to say, or that side of the business, think about the VCs versus directly the startups?
It's been a great opportunity for us with this sort of shift in our direction, embracing both venture clienting and in addition to the corporate venture capital that we used to do before. It really has allowed us to partner with other VCs and investors to a much greater extent, but also more targeted extent as well. And I think it's been really positive for us to see how it has enabled better sparring and collaboration, because they have actually now started embracing these venture climbing efforts to push forward both POCs and pilot opportunities for their portfolio, but also using us as a sparring partner in their due diligence for new investments. So assessing whether the companies that they are looking for are actually addressing real needs and challenges for the logistics and shipping industry, and also the feasibility of actually implementing it. So for relevant opportunity areas, I think it's been great not only to work with a broader scheme of startups, but also with sort of more targeted with other investors that have similar convictions and investment theses that we do on concrete opportunity areas, where we can actually help test and guide and play quite an important role in their decision-making process.
Could you, Ida, mention some of the names of the VCs that you often do things with, just to kind of scope the breadth of it and the types of firms that normally play well with Maersk?
So we have worked with really a lot of different VC firms. I'm almost hesitating to mention just a few. But I think
There'll always be some some mentioned or some forgotten, but it's not to play favorites. It's just to
and either to save you a little bit here, right? So the human brain, the ones you have talked to within the past 3 weeks are the ones you tend to remember, right? So this is, you just, put them out there, nobody forgot nobody,
No, but if I just look back at the past week, I had really great conversations with Planet A. I had really great conversation with TDQ Ventures, both of which are really looking into decarbonization also for maritime and logistics. In the US, we have a great network as well. And I think we actually have started looking now at, where do we have our greatest engagement? Whilst we invest and partner globally, we're really over-indexing on the US and North America. We also have quite a bit of engagement in Europe, but it's something that we're now beginning to work much more actively to ensure that we actually are really understanding the full breadth of market opportunity that we have ahead of us.
How come, Ida, that you over-index on the North Americas? Because Maersk, I believe you're headquartered, or yourself, or seated at the headquarters in Copenhagen. And I imagine that a lot of the team, because it's so important to be close to the mothership and the strategic initiatives and so on, I imagine many of you are in Copenhagen.
Yeah, actually, the full team of 15 employees in Maersk Growth are actually sitting in Copenhagen. You're completely right. There's two reasons for why we have worked a lot with North America. On the one hand, we have a lot of portfolio companies that are now beginning to really reach growth stages and also expand to the US, which of course have been really important for us to understand where is then the next big market that we can help enable them within. And then also from an investment perspective, I think there is just a different risk appetite and fund raising environment in the US versus Europe still, where there is a lot more fund and capital being thrown after both supply chain technology, but also climate tech solutions in the US to date than there is in Europe still. That is, of course, something that we would very much like to see change. But if you look at the amounts raised for startups, there is still a big difference.
Ida, how do you see investments in other geographies than North America and Europe?
We are still a global investor, and we continue to also look for opportunities elsewhere. It's a little bit more opportunistic, I would say. Oftentimes when we do get opportunity areas, it oftentimes comes from other co-investors and partners. But it is something that we're now, again, beginning to look at. How do we actually set ourselves up for being able to more readily assess? We have made investments from, Upfloat in Australia to Trella in Egypt. So we do also have investments elsewhere as well. But yeah, it's been a bit more opportunistic.
Yeah, and as you also have a co-invest strategy, right? It also means a lot of work in those different ecosystems, I must guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to ask you, Ida. Now I got to double click, and we are almost out of time. But given your high exposure to the North Americas, which I had not expected, what are the things you've heard the last 4 months when it comes to climate and whether you're leaning in or leaning out? Because definitely the people I listen to in the States are not exactly leaning into climate.
Of course, it's really a hot debate now, and I think the jury is still out on what some of the potentially changed regulations and decisions will have of implications for all of us. But that said, if you look at, for example, areas like carbon capture, either for utilization or for carbon removal, you do see that the US is quite sort of further ahead. There's more companies that are actively taking a role in both investments and becoming a customer of that in the US versus Europe. We've made one investment within the space in Captura, which is capturing CO2 directly from the ocean. I think that is, for example, a very interesting play where you could see both from a industry perspective, but also from a financial perspective, how that could be a very sound investment. And the likes of those opportunities, I think, will continue to have quite a lot of good headwind.
I'm super baffled by the climate tech number that you described. It does surprise me, honestly, that you're seeing higher volume in the US than here.
I think at least in terms of actual funding amounts. Of course, there's a few deals that really drive up.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say it's probably because you're at growth stage as well that you're seeing it so much. Yeah.
But we also saw it from the former government in the US, right? They put a lot of more, soft money into play, right? So it was a clear indicator that it was a big bet. How that's going to change, we'll have to see in the coming years, right?
Yeah, you can, of course, if you start counting that into it, it gets very big. Very interesting. Okay, a lot to uncover there. Andreas will be researching this further.
We'll do an episode on it and then follow up with you.
Yeah,
exactly. And we're very happy to.
Cool. I have no more questions. Do you, Jeppe? Anything you feel like we should have asked?
I don't think so. But I think from my side, Ida, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Super happy to see how far you have taken it now. And, great promise into the future. So a huge congratulations from my side to you. And then just, over to you, Ida. Any final comments from you to the listeners?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Maybe a final call to action to everyone's listening in. If you do have an interesting either investment opportunity areas or startups, especially with a focus on decarbonization of logistics and supply chains, then you know who to reach out for. And yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation there.
I am sure there will be a lot of incoming deal flow from the whole community listening in. Ida, thank you so much. Jeppe, thank you so much for saying let's bring Ida on. Of course, it's a huge privilege to have the two of you being able to cover and discuss Maersk from the inside here on a podcast where it has naturally to be on the outside.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with Ace Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.